start by sharing my screen also. Just 1 second. Perfect. So I hope you all can see my screen now. And whatever we were discussing earlier was, done very briefly. We have discussed everything, right? In today's class, what are we going to learn about? Is we are going to learn about. Let me write the agenda first of all. Agenda, I would simply say that first thing that we will be learning about is introduction to CSS. In that, we will see a lots and lots of thing about, first initial things that we can talk about is, what is CSS? Why do we need CSS? We can talk about a basic thing like inline CSS first of all, right? Different ways how we can add CSS. Inline CSS is one of the initial ways of writing a CSS. Then we can talk about internal CSS. Even when we talk about internal CSS, another thing that we have to talk about is syntax of writing CSS, right? In that way, we can say syntax of CSS rule. In that, we'll talk about selector. We'll talk about a couple of things, right? Then we can talk about external CSS. After that, an interesting discussion will be about selectors. In selectors, we have a lot of different types, ID selectors, element selectors, and things like that. This is a basic thing that I'm writing right now because I'm assuming that if I'll write too many things, you'll get confused, you'll get overwhelmed. That, okay, so many things to discuss. Where do we start? Where are we starting from? What are we learning? Will we be able to learn all of this in one single class? So just an introduction I'm writing in the agenda part. Once we clear out all of the initial discussion on introduction to CSS, some basic parts about it, and also about selectors, then we will add more agenda, right? Then we will specify more topics that we have to discuss or we have already discussed in the current class. But that, I believe, is a very basic introduction. It's a basic idea about what we will be learning in the today's class. Perfect. So let's start from where we generally start. We will just, yeah, there it is. September batch. In that, now I'm going to create a new file, new folder for CSS. In CSS, I'll just drag and open it in my VS Code. And the first thing that I will do here is I'll obviously create an index.html file. And that's right. This is where I will be starting. Now, why I have created an HTML file before writing a CSS file is basically that whenever you will try to implement some styles, right? You cannot implement styles unless and until you have the structure, right? You cannot give interior designing without having an interior, right? You cannot say that, okay, I'll go out on an open field and I'll do interior designing unless and until you have a proper building to pursue your interior designing stuffs there. So what I'll do is I'll create a basic structure, right? And in this, what are we going to start with is we are going to start with a very simple thing that we have a basic heading, right? I'll say I have a heading text. I'll say hello world, and I'll just get it into multiple. I'll just get multiple headings because right now the thing that we need to focus upon is not how do you create multiple elements and how do you write crazy styles on top of it. The main purpose of us right now is basic understanding of if you have a basic HTML element, how can you implement different styles? What are different rules and regulations while implementing CSS on top of it? So that is why, just to keep that into notice, I'll write multiple elements, and that's it. Right, three heading elements I have written, and what I want to do is I want to give styles to them. And initially, while learning CSS, we'll also start with some basic styles like changing colors, changing height, height as in size, right? And a couple of other things we can do about. Let's initially start from changing colors because that is a very simple style to give and you don't need to worry about a lot of other properties, right? We don't want you to get confused with so many CSS properties right now. We just want you to focus with the basics of CSS right now. So CSS, as we have already discussed, it's a style sheet. It is something which help us into giving styles or adding styles to the HTML structure that we have just created. So how we can implement that? We can implement that into three different ways. The first and the very intuitive way is using using inline CSS. And as the name suggests, inline CSS means that within the line, we will be writing CSS. Within every single tag, within every single element, we are going to give their style. For an example, if we have this heading element, I'll just make it, I'll just open it in the live server and this is how it looks, right? I just want to color this to any different color. I just want to color it in with red. So how can I do this? I have to use an attribute here. And the attribute that I will use is I'll use a style attribute. And this I hope recalls you, reminds you of something which we were slightly discussing in the last classes, that style is an attribute that will give you power to write some part of CSS inside here, right? So just by writing a style attribute, you can write the style of the CSS inside here, and that styles will be directly implemented to your, will be directly reflected to your elements on the page, right, which is present on the page. So this is the first thing, and this is called as inline styles. Within the style, within the element, within the line, you are writing a style. So that calls for a inline styles or inline CSS. How do we give styles this? We basically give styles having two things in our mind. The first thing is what style you want to apply, and second thing, what type of value you want to give to that style. For an example, you have to paint, you have to decorate your home. So decorating your home can come with multiple styles, can come with multiple properties. You can either paint your walls, you can either add some lightings, you can either add some type of extra furniture, you can add a couple of things, you can do couple of things to your home in order to decorate it. So the first thing that you need to decide is what thing you want to do, right? Maybe you want to do the paint, or maybe you want to bring some lights, maybe you want to add some furniture, maybe you want to do any other type of decorative activity. So the very first thing is the property that we have to choose. And the property that we are choosing to decorate our text is color text. So I would say COLOR. Exactly, this is the spelling. No, I'm not bad at English that much, right? Color, you might be writing COLOUR, but we follow COLOR here. So that's why we will write color. Second thing is we separate the property and the value with something called as colon. So I write colon, and then I have to write the value of this which I want to give. Like you say, I want to paint the walls. So what do you want to paint it with, right? You want to paint it with red, blue, green, whatever. So you'll just write this. You have given property name and then you have given the value name. Just by writing so, you'll just see that your text is suddenly painted and you can enjoy styled text in your page. Although I hardly believe anyone will enjoy this blank, like this very bold reddish color in a simple white sheet. But anyways, let's assume that this looks very good now. And this is a very basic thing that we have done with CSS. And with that, congratulations, all of you. You have stepped into the world of CSS now, and you've just you've just created a basic style with your HTML. That is how an inline CSS works. I hope nobody have any problem in understanding the basics of CSS now. Could you please elaborate the term cascading style and sheet individually? See, I believe, right, cascading style sheet simply can give us a picture that, it is, it is a way through which we can style our elements. That should be enough, I believe. Right? Any problems if you faced while we have gone through these terms and, while we have added the styles over there? If yes, you can quickly ask, or else I'll move to the next type of styling that we can do. And I'll also tell about, what if I have to add multiple properties at once? I want to color this text. I also wanted to give different height. I want to give different font property, like fonts. Like, I hope you know that, right? You have different fonts available. So what if I want to give more than one style? So how can I be able to give more than one styles? This is also will discuss just now. Right now, let's only focus upon one style right now, and then once we go to the inline and can we also no right now there is no need of adding a curly braces here. That I'll talk about later. Where do we need to add those curly braces? You can just let it be. Second thing is let's do one simple thing. Let's add more than one property here. Let's add more than one property. So in order to add more than one property, right, what people will think of, okay, I'll write a space and I'll write a comma and then I'll start writing on the property. It does not work like that. You have to give a semicolon, and that marks that one property and the value definition is done. Now you are moving for the next property and value definition. So for that, you can do color is done. So maybe what other property you want to do? Maybe let's do one property that is called as letter spacing. So I want to give letter spacing. So I'll say letter spacing, and I will give anything like I'll give 2. Let's go with this, and let's see what will be the resultant in this case. Letter spacing, I think that requires you to give some units. So I'll say maybe 5 pixel. Yeah. I hope you can see that there. You might see, right, the spacing between the letters have increased now. And that is because I've added another property. You don't need to worry about this letter hyphen spacing and why I've written 5 pixels. You don't totally need to focus on that. It's just one thing which I want you to see, that by giving another property, I mean, there is an option available to you that you can give more than one property, and that property does work. You can see the real life example. We will talk about pixels in the upcoming classes. We'll talk about letter spacing. We'll talk about other properties also, but I hope you have seen that more than one properties can be added just like this way. You can even add more property from that way. Inline CSS is perfectly working fine. But assume one situation that every text is very, very highly decorated, right? We have written 5, 6 properties on each text, and I want to decorate everything that is there in my page very extensively. So don't you think that writing so many styles for every text in the same line where you have written the structure is too much of a concerning task? सेम ही लाइन पे आपने स्टाइल लिख दिया, सेम ही लाइन पे आपने बहुत सारे कंटेंट लिख दिया, और एक ही लाइन में आपने बहुत सारे स्टाइल भर दिए, तो isn't it a very concerning task? Obviously it is, right? And that is why we don't prefer using inline CSS when we have a slightly larger code, when we have a slightly intensive code, right? We don't prefer writing inline CSS because that is too much, and that, you know, mixes the concept of styling has to be done in a different way, in a different file, and what do you say, the structure has to be done in a different file. We don't prefer doing it this way. So what happens is we tend to use another thing which goes by the name of external CSS. Sorry, I can say internal CSS first, and then we can talk about an external CSS. Internal CSS. In internal CSS, what happens is that you generally separate the styling part from the structure part in the current file only. You don't need to create a different file this time. You just can do one simple thing, that you can dedicate an area here. You can just dedicate a space here. You can dedicate a block of style, right? This is what I have done. I have used a style tag to dedicate the area where all of my styling will go, right? I'll write all of the styles here, and all of the styles will be picked and will be applied, sorry, to all the elements which are present on your page, one by one from there only, right? तो एक एक करके आपकी स्टाइल यहाँ से पिक होके सब पे implement हो जाएंगे. But what will be the problem that we will face in doing so is that we'll have to say that right now all the properties that we were writing were just written right directly here, right? Whatever property we have written just were accessible to us in front of each element. But if I just write these properties here, if I just write these properties like this way, don't you think that they will get confused? The HTML and CSS will get confused that, okay, you have written certain styles, but I'm not sure what style has to implement to what element or what styling has to be implemented at what element, right? आपको क्या styling किस element पे डालना है? I'm not sure how to handle this. This is one problem that could happen. So that is the reason why there is a concept of selectors. I'll just get these back here. Yeah, I'll just get these back here, and now we can talk about something called as selectors, right? Selectors, we'll talk about some basic selectors in the starting part, right? So that we can at least understand the concept of internal and external CSS. Once you have done that, we can come back again, and then we can talk about some more selectors, because with CSS, a couple of CSS selectors are there into the market, and you can use them, you can combine them, you can use them in a tricky way to achieve most out of the things from the CSS selectors. So what happens is that I have a concept of something called as selectors. By the way, selectors. By the way, I hope you can see that over here, if I'm writing a comment, it is coming out in a different way. But compare a comment that I'm writing here, right? Can you point out one simple thing from here, that this segment, this whole segment is completely different from this segment, right? Whatever we are writing here is not treated as an HTML, it will be treated as a CSS part. तो आप यहाँ जो भी लिखोगे वो CSS का part है, and CSS में we write CSS में we write comments in this particular way. That's why the comments are highlighting in a different way, but here in HTML the comments are highlighting in a totally different way. So anyways, I said that selectors, right? In selectors, the very first thing about selector is that what different type of selectors we have, and why do we need them? The need, you obviously understood that too many elements are there. How would you give a specific style to a specific element? So the very first type of selector that we are using is an element selector. Element selector. And what does an element selector do is basically it will select an element by their tag, or I can say a tag selector, element selector, whatever you want to call it. I generally like to call it by the name of element selector. So you just have to say that I want to select this H1. See, H1 is already selected, so let's select this H2. I mean, H1 is not selected, but H1 has some styles. Let's say that I want to select this H2. So I'll just use this H2 and I will just write it here. Right? I'll just write an H2 here. And what will happen afterwards is that if I say something like this will make sure that this is a selector. And I know you might be thinking that it should be like this because H2 was a tag, but no, we don't use this angular brackets when we define an element selector. We just write the name of the element, right? The name of the element is H2. So H2 is written, and after that we have a angular bracket, or we have a curly bracket, sorry. After this curly braces, I mean, inside this curly braces, what happens is that whatever is relevant to H2, whatever style you want to give to H2, all those style has to be there. जो स्टाइल्स आप H2 को देना चाहते हो वो सारे स्टाइल्स H2 के इस कर्ली ब्रेसेस के अंदर अंदर ही लिखेंगे, and that is how your CSS will select an element or will select all the elements which have an H2 element, and inside that you'll implement the specific size. I'll say I'll give a color property and I'll give it as maybe green now. If I do so, I would assume that my H2 element would get selected and it should have a green color when I go back to my screen. Let's see. Oops, what happened? Yeah, sometimes things happen, right? Sometimes shit happens. So that's why there could be some strange glitch from the live server or maybe from my browser only. Now you can see that we have a next heading which is in the green color. And how is it possible? It is possible because of the inline styles that we have used. Sorry, because of the internal CSS that we have used and the element selector that we are using here, right? Because this is selecting a complete element and then implementing the style on top of it. This also is a basic CSS rule. How do we write a CSS? How do we define CSS stylings, right? Element selector or any selector for an example, then the properties, and that's it, right? Properties are given like property name, colon, and the value, and then the semicolon. That's it, right? That being a very basic type of selectors. But for an example, assume a while case scenario that you have hello world 2, something like this. You have multiple H2 elements in your page because your page might have multiple instances of H2. It's not that only one H2 element can be used in your page. So if you have a scenario like this, the problem that you might face could be something like this, that all the H2 will get selected and all of them will have a green style. This could be a scenario that you're looking for, but this could also not be a scenario that you're looking for, right? I mean, you don't want all the H2s to get selected and then green color to be implemented on top of it. You might want to have only one H2 selected and then only green applied to that H2 and not to all of them. So to do more type of specificity, to do more type of customization, what CSS offers us is it offers something like a concept of ID selector and class selector. Now, what does an ID mean to you? An ID means that it has to be something unique. Your college ID should be unique. Your identification ID, which is Aadhaar, PAN numbers, or what else we have. We have passport numbers and etc. All of them are unique, right? So this is what we will do here. That we will say that we'll give a unique number or we'll give a unique ID to our elements, and when we will write that element ID now, only that element should get selected, and the style should be implemented on top of it, right? So how do we get that? We simply say we will have to define an ID here. So I'll give an ID attribute here, and I'll give it any random ID. I'll say first H2, something like this. And this has created an ID. And whenever I want to select only this heading to element, I can just say this, and inside this I can give the styles. This must look very intuitive, right? That okay, this should do the job. No, it is not correct, because while we are using an element selector, while you are using an ID selector, you cannot just write the name of the ID, because it might confuse it to something like a element. It might think that okay, this is an element that you're looking for, but this is correctly not. I mean, this is exactly not an element that you're looking for. Instead, what you should do, you should write a hash here, and just by writing a hash, it will now understand that you have an element and the ID of that element is H2. You can even just hover over this and you can see the right that what it is assuming, what your HTML is assuming, or what your VS Code is assuming, that what you are doing in your code. It is assuming कि एक element होगा कोई and उसका कोई ID होगा H2. This is what you are trying to select. This is exactly our scenario, right? So we can say I should have written this here only. And I'll also comment out the line because I don't need the H2 styles now. I just can get the style from this one. So just by doing so, if I go back, sorry, now you can see that only this first heading 2 is selected and this only has a color of green. Now the second one, although the second one also has an H2, if I write it using this way, if I just write it in this way, and if I just comment out the next part, you know what is going to happen. Both the elements are going to get selected. That means there has to be a specificity. There has to be a specificity that what will happen if I only want to select a particular element and then give some styles to it. So that is about how a what do you say? That is basically how a ID selector works. I'll combine the class selector also, and then I'll take all of your questions one by one because I know you guys might be asking for some questions and queries. I'll just entertain all of them within a second. So ID selector is one thing which we have just understood. Other thing that we can talk about is a class selector. Sorry. In a class selector, what happens is that maybe you don't want to select anything individually. You want to select things in a group. In a group means like there could be a element of a different I mean, there could be a different element, another instance of a different element, or maybe a specific part you want to select. So to club all of them together, what you can do, you can club them together by something called as a class selector. So I can even say a paragraph tag. I can say lorem 10. What I've done, I've just written 10 demi words, and you can do that also by writing lorem and write the number of words that you want to print and then just hit enter. Anyways, so I want to just do one simple thing that I want to give a class name to all of them, and I want to give them a class name of common class. Although it's not a convention that we write, it's not the way that we give class name. We don't generally use Pascal naming convention, or we don't generally use camel casing conventions here. We generally use maybe this snake case, or we use this, sort of kebab casings, right? So this is what I'm doing. I'm using this. So I'll just do one simple thing. I'll just copy paste this line and I'll use it here and I'll use it here. Right. So I just use this snake casing to basically get three elements of a common class. All these three elements have the common class name, right? Which is exactly common class. So what I will do is I'll just copy it from here and I'll just try to, give this same size in this way, and I'll give a color of maybe green. Green is already done. So let's blue. Let's give it a blue. Right. But again, you can see that we are missing out on a point that if I write it like this way, it is going to assume that you are talking about an element with the specific name. But it is not an element that we are talking about. It is a class that we are talking about. So to represent a class, we write a dot here. To represent an ID, what we were writing, we were writing a hash. To represent a class, we write a dot. So in this particular manner, if we write an element, we can just write the name of the element. If you want to select an ID, we can write a hash in front of that ID. And in order to select a class, we can just write a dot in front of it. And that's how things should work. Right. So I'll just show you the example here. And why did this is not, why is it not working? Class is there. Dot common class, color has to be blue. Am I missing something? Common underscore class. I believe it should work. What are we missing exactly? Is it green or are we not? Color is blue. I think this works only, but let's just check it. Come on. Oh god. I believe the naming convention is also correct. What are we missing? Just 1 second. Class is written. Oh shit. Sorry. The last S I was missing, right? Got it. This last S I was missing. Okay, perfect. And now you should see a blue color everywhere, right? So that's how a class works in when we talk about a selector, right? So I hope now all of you have a very, very basic idea about element selector, about ID selector, and about a class selector. And you also know what is the purpose of adding a class attribute and what is the purpose of adding a ID attribute in your elements, right? Now you can ask the questions that you were having in your mind while covering all of this, and I'll just quickly go through the questions that you were posting. We'll talk about this also about the priority. I can see some people are talking about priority. One second. What is the problem in your code? Maybe you might be that semicolon that you have written, that is written after this. What do you say? After this double quotes, and you have also not closed the, what do you say? You have also not closed the angular brackets of h1. H1 के opening का वो भी बंद बच रहा है, right? Yeah, exactly. Okay. You guys have already answered him. We can call this internal. Yes, we can call this internal style. Yes. Which extension you are using for showing yellow? This is basic. What do you say? This is an error lens that I am using, and error lint or error lens you can say. But right now, I would not suggest you to go with that one, because that will be more useful when you'll do a type of code where neatness of the code and where the modularity of the code is more dependent, and things like that. Right now, you just need to focus on writing more code. Later on, when you once you are done with writing enough of code, then you can talk about making your code more smarter. I mean, not exactly smarter, but making your code more refined and more optimal, right? We can just skip that part right now, so that's why it's not necessary for you to go with that. To put style in head or to put it in a body, so you can also put it in body also, but I would, the best part I always like, it's the head part, because from there you have a visual clarity that okay, all the styles are put here. That you can also do in the body part, but try to make sure that you are writing on it on top of the body, right? How to combine them in, and there we'll talk about priority. We'll talk about what do you say, there is a term that we use, right, about the priority, specificity, right? We'll talk about the specificity also. What if we comment out both h2 and if we say that if we comment out both the h2 part, the styles will not get implemented. The best part about HTML and CSS is that you don't get errors, right? आप कुछ भी उल्टा पुल्टा करो, either the styles will get applied properly or the styles will not get applied properly, or the element that you're trying to create would get created properly or would not get created properly. That's it. There will be no errors that you'll face. See, this is just a filler text that we used, right? It's just, you can read about the history also. That is also interesting. You can read about lorem ipsum text on the Google, and you'll find that it has a historical, what is a historical importance also. But for this, just for the time being, it's just a filler text. Whenever we create web pages or whenever we create web application, we don't focus upon writing the text inside the web page. We just write a dummy text. So this is how we use it. Yep. I got it that S was missing. Yep. Perfect. Greater. We'll talk about greater priority specificity. We'll just talk about it. I know, right? You are interested into knowing it. There is an obvious difference between ID and classes, right? ID has to be unique. Only one element can get that ID, and only that style will be implemented to that ID. But for the classes, right? Classes can be a group of elements, which could be unique, which could not be unique. I mean, obviously for unique elements, unique elements as in, like, if you want to have multiple heading to elements and you want to choose 3 or 4 heading elements and give a common style to them, you can use a class, and then you can do common styles on top of it. But it is not necessary that you are giving class that has to be the same element. आप different elements पे भी class same दे सकते हो, just like we have done here. This was a paragraph tag, this was a heading 3, and this was a heading 2. And all 3 of them has a common class, which is a common class. Yeah. We will talk about external. Just, let me complete the first part, right? We can go up in a step-by-step manner. I'll have to complete, and I'll have to ask you that if you don't have any questions with the selectors, basic selectors, with the internal CSS. If you say that you are good with it, then we can talk about the external CSS now. Yeah, definitely. I'm telling you, right? I'm not saying that I'll not take this concept of specificity. I'll go step by step only. Once I complete the specific external part, and then we can experiment around. We can see, right, what happens if we do this, what happens if we do that. Yeah. Perfect. So that everything I hope is clear to all of you, the basics of inline and internal CSS. Once that is done, now we can actually start talking about something which is more preferable. This internal CSS is also not very preferable because it's just that the same file is getting lengthier. The styles are here only. The what do you say? The structure is also here only. So we should have different files for styles. We should have different files for structure. So to create a different file, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it by the name of style.css. Please note that the name can be anything, but the syntax, the extension has to be .css only. Once I do this, right, now you'll have a different file here. And this is the part where you can write all of your styles. So what I'm going to do is maybe I'm going to add this class selector. I'm just going to remove this class selector from here. And I'm going to put it in my CSS file, to put it in my external CSS file. Right, I'm not migrating all the styles because I just also want to give an idea about how an internal CSS looks like. So that's why internal CSS is also written here, and I've moved some part of the CSS to external CSS. All the part can also be moved or migrated to external CSS, but I hope you just want to have a reference of internal and external. That's why I've done it like this way. Now, if I do so, would you see the styles coming up? No, we cannot see the styles coming up yet, because the problem that is happening right now is style.css is a completely different file and HTML is a completely different file, right? So how would this HTML file know that I have another file where the styles are written and I have to import those styles, right? So to just get this thing done, what you can do, you can basically go to your head section, obviously, because it is going to act as a resource. So resource linking generally happens at your external CSS only. So I'm going to just link a file, and this is how we link a CSS file. This is how we link an external CSS file. We say link, we use a link tag, which is again an empty tag. We use a relation attribute, which specifies that what type of link we are adding. Since we are adding a style sheet, so that's why relation is equals to style sheet, right? Relation has to be style sheet. Now this is a href, which means you are adding a reference, right, from where to borrow the styles. We want to borrow the styles from style.css. That's why href is written as style.css, and this is present in the same folder. That's why it will pick this folder. It will pick this file very smoothly. If assume that this style.css is present in a different folder, what would you do? You know, right, how to put a file, how to choose a file from a different folder. That you have already done with image part also. So you now have a basic idea about how the file can be linked to your index.html file, and now how we can be able to see the outcome of that. Let's see if you can see the modified changes. Yes, now we are able to see the modified changes. That means it is working, right? External CSS is written now in a different file, and that is imported in your internal, that is imported here in your HTML file, and that's how you can see the outcome of both of them, right? I hope that is also making sense. You don't need to worry about the syntax. That's easily available on the internet, and you can learn that over the period of time. You just need to focus that a file can be linked to an HTML file just by using this link tag and writing a relation attribute and writing this href attribute. I hope that is clear. Any confusion that you are having for external CSS? If yes, you can ask. Else, I'll just quickly move to the part which many people were very curious about, that specificity and what will happen if we write a style this way and we write a style that way, etc. I'll just talk about it. And after that, we can talk about selectors, because selectors is a very interesting discussion that I like to have. And again, we can talk about the other things like other CSS properties and how to use them, etc. What about external CSS? We've just completed it. What is attribute? Again, right, we are going too far right now. We have just started with the selectors, right? We will talk about pseudo selectors, pseudo elements. We'll talk about a couple of other things, right? I'll give you a resource from where you can just get these done also. Okay, I believe everything is clear with the external CSS concept at least. Perfect. So if this is done, right, let's see one example that what will happen if I will just do one simple thing from here. If I say that first, let's do one thing, that I write the same style. I'll write the same style over here. I'll just format it. Okay, this is not formatting. I believe I don't have a formatter for CSS, but anyways, let me just make it look intuitive. Okay, so what I have done is I've added both the same styles from external CSS and from internal CSS, and I'll just going to alter this color, right? I'll just say maybe this time I want it to be brown. this, right? Now, what do you think is going to be the outcome in this particular thing, right? Will the final classes have a color of blue, or will the final classes have a color of brown? This is what I want to know from you, that what do you think will happen? Then I'll reveal why is it happening and why, like, how we can change the thing that is happening. People are saying brown, blue. Mix may people are saying. Let me analyze the situation and let me tell you. The answer is going to be brown only, right? How is it going to be brown? Let's see. First of all, let's verify is it brown or not. Yep, this is brown. Right. I'll just do one type of mischief now. I'll just do one type of mischief, and I'll say, dude. Sorry, dude. What if I'll say my answer is reversed now, and now brown will not be the final color. Blue will be the final color. See, I hope you have got the answer right. That's what I'm trying to say. That whatever will be the latest style that you have written, whatever will be the latest style that is loaded, right, that will be the final color that you'll have. And that's the end of the discussion. You don't need to say, okay, external CSS is always better, or it is always more powerful than internal CSS, or than inline or external. It's not like that. The simple thumb rule is whatever is the latest command that your text or that your element would have received, that is going to be the final. That is going to be the final style that it will receive, right? यहाँ पे अभी हो क्या रहा था? What was happening here is that initially I have written this link tag on the top, after which I have mentioned my after which I have added my internal CSS. So since my internal CSS was loading later on, after I have already loaded my external CSS, so my internal CSS was more was more recent. That's why the styles of that was getting implemented. Right now, what I've done, I've just added the link, or I've just added the external CSS after the inline CSS, sorry, after the internal CSS. So what happens is that this will be more recent instruction. So that's why whatever styles I've given there will be implemented as the as the latest style. That is, I hope, is very, very clear to all of you. Now, where will this inline CSS come into the picture, right? We are not importing it. We are not doing things like that. The answer is inline CSS will be the final most instruction that your element is going to receive. Inline CSS में आप जो भी लिखोगे वो सबसे latest instruction होगा that your element is ever going to receive, because it starts from top to bottom, right? Doesn't matter if you have added the style on top. Doesn't matter if you have added this external CSS on after that. But obviously at the end, your element is going to go through this, right? And whatever is written in the inline CSS is always the farthest and always the latest, I would say, instruction given to your element. So inline element will be the final type of design, will be the final type of style your element is ever going to receive, right? After that, it is debatable that whatever you have imported recently, if you have imported this recently, then this will be implemented. If you have imported the externally recently, then that style will be finalized. Right? It is overwriting only, na? Hey, you're teaching very fast. Why you're not saying? Is it? I don't see. I believe that while we are while I'm covering a particular topic now, I might be saying things in a little faster manner at some point, but I'm giving you time to absorb that, and I'm giving you time to just wonder upon that. I'm also giving some time to for you to raise questions and then have a discussion upon it. Might be the situation, but I generally I'm thinking that this is something not investing much time upon. That's why I've taken it in this way. But anyways, I'll listen to this feedback and I'll try to slow down a little bit at some points. Yeah, could be. If you are having specific issues, like if you were not getting any, see, this could happen if you have not got the last things right. Ki inline kya hai, external kya hai, and things like that. This could be happening because you are not clear with it. One thing could be that. And second thing maybe I'm teaching a specific thing for slightly faster for a beginner's perspective, so that you can also tell that I have not got this. Can you please repeat that? I'll be more than happy to repeat that. Yeah, perfect. No issues. So I hope this has given you more clarity about the specificity. कि specificity में कैसे होगा? अगर आप एक काम करते हैं, let's do one simple thing. I'll just try to replicate this style now. Let's do this one. I have a first H2. I just also gave the same first H2 style here also. Perfect, right? So I've done two things. I have added first H2, which is selecting this element. This element is target now, right? Let me tell you that this is a target element. And in this target element, I want to select it with multiple ways. I'll select this element with three ways. First, what I'll do, I'll write an inline style here. I'll say color, and I'll give it a color of something different. Now I'll give it a color of this, what's it say, dark blue, or I should give this dark golden road. I'm not sure what color is it, but let it be. I'll just give it a color of dark golden road, right? And the same thing, I'll try to do it from my ID selector, and I'll just try to give it a green color from the internal CSS. From external CSS, I'll give it a color of something like purple, or I'll just try to think, yeah, I'll just give a color of purple. Three different colors I've given from three different CSS. Can you tell me that what is going to be the final answer this time? What is going to be the final color that you will see to this hello world that is written on top? I mean, top as in the second heading hello world that you will receive. Can you tell me, right, what is going to be the answer here? Is it going to be dark golden? Is it going to be green? Or is it going to be purple? Answer is very, very straightforward. Obviously, it will be dark golden. Obviously, right? Because that is the last instruction. Let's, for an example, let's try to switch this. I hope you know that this is not going to affect it. Even if I write this on top, even if I write this on bottom, it is still not going to affect the answer, because the last instruction that we are getting is this. What if I just remove this last instruction from here, this inline CSS, and then I try? Can you tell me what is going to be the answer here? Is it going to be green, or is it going to be purple? What is it going to be? Obviously, it is going to be green. What if I just want to reverse this? I just want to make this purple as a final style. Will it become purple now? Yes, it will become purple. That's as simple as it could be. So that is about the specificity about it, right? I hope you don't have any confusion with this scenario now. Is it better? Is it cool? Sure, perfect. Now, if that is done, we can move to the next part. Let me see what else we have to discuss. We have talked about introduction to CSS. We have talked about, how CSS is used and what is the purpose of CSS. We have talked about internal CSS. We have talked about inline CSS. We have talked about external CSS. We have also talked about link tag, right? Then preferences of rule we have already told, like what is a preference, what is the specificity of CSS. Whatever is the latest instruction that will be final to your element. Box model will come too much later, right? Abhi box model pe we are not going. We are just starting with a very basic properties, right? I'm telling you a couple of times that you are asking this question. That is really good that you are curious about pseudo elements, pseudo selectors, some things like, things like, what do you say, hover state and these states, right? But these things we will tackle later on. Gradually we will tackle on, right? In this class, we'll try to understand some basic concepts about selectors. First of all, we'll try to see their the use cases of these selectors, and then we will later on come to these points. Yeah, one more question we have seen. Can you elaborate more style attributes? See, first thing is, style is one attribute that we will use. We use properties inside CSS, right? That will be better to say ki or properties ke bare mein can we discuss about. So that properties about how to give different spacings from left and right, or maybe how to give other type of designs, like how to give a box shadow, how to give maybe some sort of animation, some sort of transitions, how to how to just translate your box, how to do things like that. We'll do all of these things with the help of properties in CSS, right? So attribute is going to be one only, that is style attribute. Properties will definitely change. Can you explain preferences once? See, preferences will mean that whatever is a latest command or latest instruction that your element will receive, that will be the priority of your styles. In a very obvious order, assume that you have used three of them. You have used an internal CSS, you have used an external CSS, and you have also used an inline CSS. Tino CSS आपने use किया है. You have used three of them, and you have imported external CSS before your you have imported your external CSS before your you have imported your external CSS maybe after your internal CSS, right? इसके बाद आपने ये चीज लिखा है. So what is going to be implemented. Will this be the final styles, or will the style written below will be the final style? Take it with one example that you want to paint your wall and you have 3 members in your house. The first member comes in and they say that, okay, I want to paint it with red color. That will start painting it with red. Other person will come and they said, oh, no, not red. Maybe let's paint it with green. They'll start painting it with green. And then the last person comes in and say, okay, not red, not green. I want to paint it with blue. What do you think will happen with the wall? Obviously, in a real life scenario, a mix of red, green, and blue will be printed. But in a very practical scenario, in a very ideal scenario, right, the blue will be the last style, will be the last command that the painter got. So that's why it will paint it blue. That's it. Similarly, since this was one command that it got out, maybe painting it to green, it will try painting it to green. But maybe at last, then you'll receive, okay, not green, maybe you want to print it with purple. So purple will be the final color, right? But all of you know is that inline style is always going to be the latest command that it will ever receive. So inline CSS will have the highest priority on top of your internal and external, and the remaining two depends upon which is imported lastly, which is imported recently, right? Perfect. Yeah, that is it. Yeah, perfect, right? Recorded lecture will be available. I'm not sure. I think tomorrow morning it will be available, right? You can just I'm not sure how it works, right? I'm not on the operational side. Maybe immediately after the class you receive the recording or what. I'm not sure, but I believe, right, if you are present in the live class, you should enjoy the live presence and you should just involve with the discussion rather than thinking of, okay, when I'll be receiving this recorded class. Perfect. Right. So we have seen about we have discussed about some selectors, right? Okay, see, yeah, specificity. Okay, sorry, I've tried, mixing up the concepts. See, specificity, and there is one thing called as what do you say, preferences of styles, right? So preferences of styles, or I would say, in what particular order, priority of the styles is what we have discussed about. Now, specificity might be that, okay, we are trying to select the same type of element with different selectors, and what do you think will be the latest style, and how does it works, right? We'll talk about this once we cover this selectors now. We have just covered 3 basic selectors. One is an element selector or a tag selector. Second one is a ID selector, and third one is a class selector. Now is the time when we can actually talk about more selectors, when we can talk about what different type of selectors we have. Again, I'll give you a very good resource. I'll give you a very fun resource from where you can start with, and then we can have this discussion continue. Yeah, okay. Yeah, exactly, right. Chalo. So now when I talk about selectors, right, this is a very basic example you all know, right? I'll just quickly write it. ID selector is there, and for the class selector, what do? You basically say this. I'll just get it from here, and I'll just paste it. Perfect, right? So class selector is also there. Now it's just obvious that not everything can be achieved using these different type of selectors. Suppose you have a situation that you want to select, you have nested elements, right? आपके पास nested element है, and inside a paragraph tag you have multiple divisions. This could be a scenario, right? You have maybe multiple, maybe this is not correct, I should say. You have a division element inside which you have multiple paragraphs, right? You have a division, and inside which you have multiple paragraph elements, something like this. Okay. Right. And you also have a paragraph element outside also. You can say you can have a paragraph element and that is outside also. Something like this is the scenario right now. Yeah. Right. And maybe you want to select all the paragraph elements which are inside the division only, or maybe you can although use classes and IDs to get the particular selection. आप ऐसा कर सकते हो कि classes और IDs का use करके ये चीजें कर सकते हो, but it will not be an efficient solution. For example, you want to select some elements which are inside a nested element, and maybe you want to select them in a specific order, that you want to select all the even childrens of that, all the even elements from here. You want to select all the odd elements, or you want to select the very first paragraph tag which is there inside a division, or maybe you want to select the last. Something like that could happen, right? A specific thing you have in your mind, and you want to use the selectors given to you by CSS to effectively get that selection, to effectively apply styles to them. अगर आपको ऐसा कुछ करना है, if you want to do something like this, then for that you have to know about more selectors, and that is what we will just discuss about right now. And the very first thing that I have on my list, right, that we have on the agenda sheet is basically like the nesting selector, you can say, chaining selectors. In fact, before that, I have one more thing for you, and that is called as universal selector, right? What exactly is a universal selector, by the way? A universal selector is a selector which basically selects all the elements of your page, of your document, and gives a common style to them. For an example, maybe there is one thing called as by default padding or by default margin. I can do one simple thing. I can say this is how we represent a this is how we represent a universal selector. You can see, right, we have not given any space from top, we have not given any space from left, right, anywhere. We have not given any gaps between them. How come there is still a space from all the sides, right? How come this space is coming from all the sides? This is, by the way, the basic styling that all of your elements will get. Let me also verify it for you. I'll just right click here and I'll just click on this inspect element. And what I will do is I'll just click on this element, right? This basically is a element selector, I would say. This is basically to tap onto any element and just see what is a corresponding HTML written for it, what is corresponding CSS written for it, and a couple of other things. So if I'll click on this one, you can see the element on my right hand side is selected. This is a corresponding HTML part for it, right, which is rendered here. Apart from that, you can also see, if I'll just scroll here, if I'll just open this page up, you can see a style to this element is given, and the color of that is red, and the letter spacing is given to be 8 pixels. Where is this coming from? This is coming from the this is coming from the inline CSS that we have given, right? The same style is getting applied here, right? And you can also see the by default style it occupies the by default style of this and that, right? Which we are not talking about right now. But I hope a very basic idea you are at least getting, that you can tap on any element and you can see the styles which are written for them. You can also see the HTML written for them. So let's just do one thing, that I want to nullify all the margins and all the paddings that we have. So I can just nullify them by writing margins, margin, and then equals to 0. If I just say margin equals to 0, all the margins of all the elements will just get to 0, and you'll not see any space from left, right, and just like that. This is what we have done by using this universal selector and just nullifying all the margins of all the elements, right? Is this making some sense? That how did it? How is it working? You still might see that your H1 is still enjoying some type of margin. That might be because you have used some type of styling here, which is overriding with this internal CSS. Something like this is happening maybe. So that's why there is a slight margin that you can see with your heading element. Again, I'm not sure if that is margin or if this is a padding. I would say no, this is not margin, this is a padding. So I'll just do one more thing. I'll just remove the extra padding from all of them, and I'll just say 0. Now you'll not see any padding also. It's still enjoying it. I don't think it is enjoying any padding. It is might be a bit default behavior of all the H1 elements. Yeah, exactly, right. So I hope you have got it. There must be no confusions. All right, perfect. Chala. Now about selectors, right? So I'll just, before even talking about any selector, I'll just go with one resource which I hope you guys might have seen. This. Okay. So this, I believe, is a very, very good resource whenever you want to learn CSS selectors, right? In a much fun way, in a much remarkable way, right? Because what happens with CSS selectors is that if you use a specific type of selector more oftenly, you will be more habitual to using that selector. If you don't use any specific type of selectors, you'll be more habitual to, you'll be more prone to टू फॉरगेटिंग दैट पर्टिकुलर सेलेक्टर. मान लो आपने कोई सेलेक्टर बहुत ज्यादा यूज किया है, तो आपको वो ज्यादा दिमाग में रहेगा, आप उसको ज्यादा फ्रीक्वेंटली यूज कर पाओगे, रादर देन कोई एक सेलेक्टर है जिसको आप उतना यूज नहीं करते हो, दैट विल बी आउट ऑफ योर मेमोरी. सो I always recommend you learning selectors when you will actually implement that, when you have to actually implement that, and when you have solved a problem, when you have given a style using that selector. Then for a longer space of time, it will be there in your memory and you'll be able to better utilize it, maybe while creating your actual projects, or maybe while trying to recall what possible ways you can use to get a particular style. In this, what is happening is it is more type of a representative game. There you can see a type of HTML is written in the right hand side, right? It is again a dummy HTML, I will say. There is no tag of plate. There is no tag of for the thing that you will see here. But this represents that plate is an element that we want to select, right? And this is the area where you have to write a selector which will select this particular thing. This plate is an element, right? So the task is to select the particular plate. How will you select all the plates? You can see, right, these plates are moving also. So how will you select the plate? You would select this plate element by writing the name of the element. The name of the element is what? The name of the element is plate. Once you write this, you can see it says type selector is written on the right hand side, which means select the element by their type. Whatever is the type of the element, right? You'll just have to write the type of the element and this will get selected. Right. So let's do it. And there is a small description that selects all the element of type A, so and so and so. Right. You can also see an example also is written here. Right. Just let's hit this and let's see if we will be able to reach from level 1 to level, level 2 at least. And if I hit enter here, and you can see that we are now on the level 2 of the level 32. Right. That means the first level is successfully passed and now we are at the level 2. Here we have a different task. Here we have to select all the bento boxes. Right. And bento boxes is nothing these thing which are moving here, and this is a corresponding HTML code written for that. So you have to select the bento boxes. How will you select those bento boxes? You can again get a hint from here that you have to use a type selector or an element selector. So for that you can say bento, and once you hit enter on this, right, I am assuming that you'll be moving to the level 3, and yes, you have moved to the level 3. I hope you have got a gist of how this how will you just how will you just play around with this game now, and you'll also be learning the CSS selectors from the very game itself. I'll just first of all share this link with you so that you can also try it along. And you can just try not to exceed more than 18-20 levels, because that is too much only. In fact, if you even go to like level 12, 15, that should be more than sufficient for the time being, because many times what happens is that we as a beginner think that knowing more selectors is a good thing. I should know this selector, I should know that selector, I should also know about this, I should know the difference between this and that selector. That is good, but having a shallow knowledge about just these selectors without actually implementing them is worse, right? So even if you have a knowledge of a handful of selectors and if you use them very effectively, that is a more good symbol. But just knowing more selectors will not make you a good CSS expert, right? You have to practice the CSS properties, you have to practice those CSS selectors in actual projects, then you could become a good master of CSS. Else you just remembering all the properties is not a good thing that is going to ever take you anywhere, right? Because you might not remember all the properties, but you just need to have that way to figure out how could I use this property in my own way to get a particular style, right? Now it's about this ID selector, right? And it selects an element with a particular ID. You can see you have to select the fancy plates. You have two plates here, a plate with the ID of fancy, a plate without any attribute. So if you want to select the plate which has a fancy, you want to select the fancy plate, how will you select that fancy one? You'll just say hash and you'll say fancy. Just by doing so, you will be selecting a plate which has fancy, which is fancy in nature. And now you'll be moved to the next level, right? So that is how a basic type of selector that we have seen, like element selector or a, element or a tag selector that we have seen earlier. And now, or a type selector that they were saying it. And now we have also talked about ID selector. Now we have something like an interesting case, which is called as descendant selector, right? What exactly is a descendant selector now? That if I write a particular element just like this, if I have an apple element which is inside a plate tag, and I want to select the apple which is only inside the apple tag, how will I select it? Right? This is the situation that we have right now. So in order to tackle that, we will we'll talk something about a descendant selector, right? That okay, a element which is inside a specific element, how will we select that? Yeah, exactly, right. So you will just simply say you'll have to write the first element, which is which is a plate. Inside plate we have an apple, so I'll say this. If I write this, this is an example of a descendant selector, and if I just do this, the apple is selected, and now we have got to the next level, which is a combination of both an descendant and an ID selector, right? In this, you can see that I have to select the pickle on a fancy plate. You have a pickle on a plate. You have a pickle on a plate, but you want to select the pickle on the fancy plate. So how would you do this? The first thing is you need to select that fancy plate, and then on top of it, you can search for this pickle, right? If you just write plate and pickle, what it is going to select? It is going to select, sorry, PIC clearly. It is going to select both the elements, which we are not looking for, right? We don't want to select both the pickles. We want to select the pickle, which is our fancy plate. So if I do this, sorry, I should say fancy, na? If I do this, now this is selected, and now we have moved to the next one. Now is a class selector that, we want to select the small apples. We have a small apple here, we have a small apple here. I want to select apples which are small. So I can just use this class name. I can just say dot small, dot small. And just by doing so, I would be able to select both the small apples, right? Yes, perfectly, right? I was able to select all the, all the small apples. I hope all these examples that we have done so far, it is making complete sense. You have understood about the descendant selectors. You have understood about ID selectors, about class selectors, and about that tag selector also. Yeah, this is only for the selectors, right? We are not talking about styles and anything. This is just to make you a good it is just to make you good habit of knowing all the selectors. तो यहाँ से आपको selectors का अच्छे से पता लग जाएगा. It is for selectors only. Right. So this, I believe, is a better way of knowing selectors rather than just me trying to show you different ways, because that way you are not going to remember things, right? You are just going to say that, okay, we have heard these things into the class, and that I'm not sure how does it works. So you can always refer to this thing just to quickly, recall all of the selectors that you will ever need. Now, the next type of selector we have is, again, it's a combination of a class selector that you can combine the class selector with other selector just to get a specific type selector. For an example, that you want to select you want to select a bento box which has a specific class. You want to select an orange which has a specific class. So for that, what you can do, maybe you can say, right now what we have to select all the small oranges. So either you can directly write small, right? But if you just write small, all the small things, this is also small, this is also small, this is also small. So three things will get selected. But what we want to select all the small oranges. The first thing is we have to select all the oranges first, right? पहले आपको oranges देखने हैं. In oranges, you have to go specifically for a small orange. So if you just write orange, it is not going to do the job, because orange, couple of orange we have. If you only write small, it is also going to select all things which are small. So the better solution of that will be orange dot small. That means element orange which has a class of small, all of that should be selected. Now we have moved from that level to the next level, right? The next question, that is, you have to select small oranges into the bentos, right? This is interesting. It is a combination of 2 and 3 things now. That it is a practice time. You cannot even go for a you cannot go for a hint now. That you have to select all the small oranges which are on top of bentos, right? So this, I believe, you will get it right. Let's see what do you think should be the answer of this case. All the small oranges which are on top of bentos. Situation kya hai? Pehle you cannot select all the oranges because different oranges are there. You also cannot select the small oranges because you cannot select the small because couple of things are small. You have to select all the small oranges which are on top of bento. So let's see what you are going to do in this case. Yeah, everyone, I believe all the answer that I've seen right now is correct. Right. We first of all have to select the bento because uske andar hi hum nest dekhenge. So I'll select a bento. After that, I want to select all the oranges, but not all the oranges, all the small oranges. So that I do. So I'll be moving to the next level. That's it, right? That's as simple as it could get. If I move to the next part, then you'll see something about a comma combinator, or something we say as chaining selector bhi bol dete hain kabhi kabhi, in a way that again I could be wrong in saying it as a chaining selector, because sort of sometimes it looks like a chain to me only, कि एक selector के बाद आपने दूसरा selector लिख दिया, or you can say descendant के को भी you can say a chaining selector. It totally depends upon your scenario. You just need to know how it works, right? It's not that you are only focused upon the naming and not about the actual working. So right now what we are talking about is a combinator selector, and with that, let's see the question that you want to select all the plates in the bentos. You want to select plates भी सारे select करने हैं, सारे bentos भी select करने हैं. So how will you select plate in the bento? You can either say you will select plate by writing plate. You can say bento by writing bento. But you want to select both of them, so you can say plate and bento by saying plate comma bento. If you do so, then both of the elements will get selected, and that should be done. Why not plate space bento? What will happen if I write plate space bento? What will it signify? It will signify that I want to select a bento which is inside a plate tag, which is not happening right now. So that's why plate space bento will not do the job. Plate comma bento will do the job. And that's how yes also successfully cleared out the next round. And we are at the round number 10. I want to select everything in my everything which is there in present in here. How can I select it? I can just select it by writing this star here, and which will mean that everything is selected. And now we have gone to the next level, right? I hope you are getting things till this point. Perfect. The next question that we have is select everything on a plate, right? I want to select everything which is inside a plate. You can also use a combination of, selectors in this case. First thing is you have to select a plate first of all, and then on top of everything which is on plate. So you can say, pehle the plate select kar lo, and inside which I want to select everything. So I can do something like this, which I believe should be correct. And that's it, right? So this is how you do things, right? And from this onwards, we have some things which we generally don't use very oftenly. Adjacent sibling selectors, I have never seen people using very, very oftenly. When we see things like, general sibling selectors, this is also something we have not seen people using very, very frequently. Child selector is also something which is used slightly commonly, right? Then we have first child is also something, which is used in some specific scenarios, but this is also a situation, right? So this is what I want you to practice now. I'm not investing the class time to just nitpick and just read out things here and just to give just to read things out from here and just to give an example from here. Everything is written in a very structured manner here, and you can just practice it out here, and then you will be able to better recall it, because once you have written something and once you have seen the outcome of that, then you'll be able to retain it for a longer time rather than just listening it from me. So up till, I believe you can go up till first type of also you can think of. Maybe this is also not very, very commonly used. Nth child is used oftenly. Yeah, I believe you can just go to not negation pseudo, not very, very commonly used, but you can just go up to I think level 32 only, right? And just try your luck, right? Just try how much you can learn from there. Obviously you don't need to know everyone. You should not have this anxiety of, okay, what is this attributes ends with a selector, or what is this attribute wildcard selector. You don't need to worry much about these type of things. You can just play around, whatever feels comfortable to you, just go up to that level. Else you can drop in between also. But my main motive from telling you is this is that that you'll be able to have a overall knowledge of all the most important selectors we use. We still might have some things like we do use something like colon hover, use colon active, you use couple of other things that will be better understood once we'll actually go to more projects with more CSS properties and with more creative things of doing creative things of actually building it, right? Building those creative things, actually, I would say. So that is a basics of selectors, and that is a basics of CSS. Any questions, if in case you have right now? I'll not go much specific upon ki selectors mein kya difference hai, and not going on this right now, because I want all of you to genuinely try all of them, all of these levels. Just play along with this game, because once we do this now, then it will be good way to discuss it along with the complete class. Else, if I'll just keep on entertaining those questions, it will be very specific question. Few people know about that selector, few people don't know about that selector. So that would create an overwhelming situation in the class. So I'm just giving you time from this class onwards. You'll have, I think, a break of one class in which you'll be receiving some resource video. You can also play along with this in that resource video wala time mein. And when we meet in the next class, I would assume all of you would have got decent idea about this, and then we can be in a good state to have this discussion on different type of selectors and differences between this and that and that. Right now, margins and padding ka discussion bhi I'm not doing right now, because that will be done later on stage. I'll just give you one brief example, or one brief real life example to relate it with. Is that suppose you have multiple, I mean, obviously the Great Indian Sale or whatever, the big billion days and things like that is coming up, right? So what happens with those e-commerce packages that you receive is, you receive a box inside which you receive the content of the box, right? And whatever, maybe suppose you have ordered a mobile phone, so you receive the mobile phone box, but there is a padding added to that mobile phone, right? There is a bubble wrap added to that. So you have a box inside which you have a content of mobile phone box, inside which whatever spaces is left between the box and the content is called as padding. Box के बीच में और content के बीच का जो gap होता है, that is padding. Suppose you receive multiple boxes, multiple courier boxes you have received. Different boxes have some space when you put them to your shelf, when you put them to your when you put them to your home or whatever, to your table, right? तो हर box के बीच में थोड़ा space कभी-कभी maintain करते हो because it looks nice to have a space and then arrange it to your decks or arrange it to a shelf. So whenever we have an outer space with different boxes, that is called as margins. That is a very layman example, I know, but later on when we will go upon this specific discussion, we will discuss it in a much detailed manner. See, with plate wala example, because like on top of plate, you want to select everything. So that's why everything selected on top of plate is written as plate space star. Yes, exactly. Yeah, if you use star, it will affect the whole HTML. Tailwind CSS uses inline CSS is good for beginners. What are the big practices you should follow? Well, okay. So right now you should not be focusing upon using Tailwind CSS or any other CSS libraries or these type of things, because I genuinely believe that if you are a beginner, you should write more of the vanilla CSS because you'll have a habit of knowing every property from behind the scenes. You'll be able to better debug, or you'll be able to better customize those other CSS libraries, because with Tailwind CSS, with Bootstrap also, you have to customize it at some point of time, maybe, because not everything is given to us by Tailwind, not everything is given to us by Bootstrap. So if you know the vanilla CSS best, then it will be easy for you to move to that one. Tailwind CSS obviously is very much in detail, is very much in trend these days, right? So you should definitely explore it at least once. For the people not knowing what is Tailwind CSS, don't worry. We'll try to get a quick sneak peek of what Tailwind CSS is, maybe in the upcoming classes, but not right now. See, ideally, Tailwind CSS is not added in the course, but maybe for some small short of duration of time, maybe while doing practical sessions, कुछ आप project बना रहे हो, तो उस time पे you can talk and we can discuss that Tailwind part, but not now, at least. Not sure on how many lectures we have and etc. I've told you multiple times that I'm not on the operational part. I don't count how many classes we have on a specific topic, but there will be ample amount of classes, don't worry. All right. I guess basics of internet also was not in the course. Yeah, I mean, few things were not there in the course, and we have added explicitly. Maybe few things will be like, you'll say, okay, I also want to know like how internet works and things like that. This things was also like very shallowly discussed, maybe, right? But it's just that you should get the overall understanding, right, from what was mentioned and what you're supposed to do. Yes, right. Perfect. Could you send today's code? Yes, I'll pass on it to Varun, and he'll maybe send it to the Slack, or maybe he'll add it to the dashboard, whatever feels suitable to him. He'll just do it that way. All right. So with that, I believe that is end of the class. We can conclude the class now. That is the main agenda that I have to cover for the class. I hope you have got a basic understanding of HTML of CSS now. Any quick questions if you have, please do quickly ask in the chats. Yeah, you'll be receiving it shortly. Not right now, because you don't. I believe we have not done a couple of good things right now to actually create something out of it. But वो चीज करने के बाद you'll definitely receive some sort of assignments, which small projects which you can work upon. Okay, that's all for the class, I believe. I hope you don't have any questions for today's class. All right. Thank you for joining in. Right. I'll just turn the recordings off now.